Hello, everybody. Hope you're having a good evening. Welcome to Awakening Your Inner Genius. This is a podcast we're doing as a separate module for people to understand our journey, how we got here, how this experience unfolds for some, and different ways of looking at the message that we're talking about with the home study course. And what led me personally to the home study course, and that's what I'm going to talk about today, is a little bit about my adventures as a younger person, a younger adult, and as a kid coming up. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what happened, how I ended up needing and knowing that I needed something different in life, and that there was more to life than the life I was living. For me, my story is a pretty dramatic story. I've had a lot of experiences I think a lot of people don't have. I don't know if that's because I came here with some soul agreement to climb a lot of mountains and fall down a lot of hills and pick myself up and then climb more mountains. But it has been an amazing journey at this point in my life for all the things that I've been able to put together once I found the way, the path to the Russells and the path for me to recovery. And that goes back to when I was a kid. So I'll start out when I was younger. I grew up in a little town. It was a nice little town in Pasadena. It's called South Pasadena. It was a real great family town, had a great community. I grew up as the poor kid in the town. I was definitely the poor family. I had no father in my home. It was just my mother and my brother and my sister and myself. So it was, three kids and one mother looking for a husband. And my father was not around. So I grew up basically with a single parent, and she was working all the time. So I really didn't have a lot of parental guidance, which can happen to certain families, and that's just part of what goes on. But for me, I grew up craving attention, wanting attention, not getting enough of it, feeling like the poor kid, the odd man out, so to speak. And I grew up in a great neighborhood, so that saved me. The town was my sanctuary. That's where I lived more in the neighbors than I did at my own home, and the neighborhood raised me, so to speak. So I really loved where I lived. I was coming into that picture you just saw was me in the 7th grade. And that was the year for me. I had this most amazing experience. As I was a child coming up, I was rebellious, fun-loving, lots of good character, charming, and also a bit of a troublemaker. But this image you're seeing now is a year of my life that was probably it was one of the greatest years of my life. And it changed my life forever. That was the year that in my 4th year of going to church camp, I went to a church, my local church. Again, the neighbors raised me, and one of our neighbors would feed us Sunday breakfast if we would go to church. That was the kind of condition. And Sunday breakfast had donuts, and I didn't get donuts in my home. So I would get up early and go to church so that I could get donuts, and I got to pick what cereal I wanted to eat. So that was my Sunday motivation to go to church. And so after the donuts and the cereal, I was like, okay, now I got to go to church. But at the end of the day, I learned some great values. I went to Sunday school continuously as a child for, I want to say, a good 5 years of my life. So I want to think from 6 to 11, that area. That's when I went to church and started learning more about a way of life, about this man called Jesus Christ, and about Christianity and things like that were not really affecting me. And the reason I mention that is I just felt like I didn't know what to grab a hold of. I didn't want to be just a sheep following the pack. And I felt like that's what people were doing, just saying, yeah, Jesus this, and I love Jesus, but not really, for me, understanding what that meant or what that relationship meant. I just couldn't say I believe and I've accepted Christ in my heart. It was just something I couldn't do until I felt truly connected to it, or something had resonated with me. I know now. I didn't know then, but I just, hung on. And that was one of the things that went on in my life is at a church camp. My last year in church camp, I went there 4 years. And so my last year was my 11th year. I was 11 years old. And I had been kind of bucking the whole idea of accepting Christ in my heart, which is the main goal of church camps and Christianities and a lot of churches. I'm not knocking it. I'm just saying that that's a lot of the goals, just to get the children to accept Jesus Christ in their heart. So again, I had bucked that, and basically, I didn't want to say buck it. I just was willing to say that I haven't done it yet because I haven't been compelled to do it. Nothing has really convinced me of what Jesus is or how Jesus can be a part of my life, even though I had attended church. But in my 11th year, I decided after a period of time of doing this that I needed to change. Things were starting to change inside me. In my 11th year, I was starting to maybe grow up to my teens, if you will. Tweens is a better term. They call it the tweens. And so there was change coming, and I was intending on doing this, accepting Christ in my heart, because I had felt like something had happened and that there was something here. And so I accepted. One night I got in trouble, and a counselor took me outside, counselor that I liked, and he told me, hey man, why are you always causing so much trouble? Why do you always need attention? And I was a good kid, so I was like, I'm not trying to cause trouble. I'm just, having fun. But you interrupt everybody, and you're always interrupting the meeting. Well, why can't you just sit there and be quiet? And how was I going to say, because I'm lacking attention at home, so I'm trying to get it anywhere I can. So I didn't know as a kid, but it was a little awkward. And then the next question came, well, have you accepted Jesus in your heart? And I had said no. And it was kind of known around the community of that church and the camp that I hadn't done it yet. And that because I hadn't been convinced. I hadn't been convicted that there was something there for me. But I had been planning on it, and I told the counselor that, no, I have not accepted Christ in my heart yet, but I'm planning on it. And he's like, well, when? And I said, soon. And he goes, well, then why don't we do it right now? And this is an important part of my life, and that's why I'm telling this story. So we proceeded to get down on our knees. He invited Christ in and said, repeat after me. And I accepted Jesus in my heart, to come into my heart as my Savior. And for me personally, fireworks went off inside. I mean, fireworks. I lit up like a Roman candle. I had this surreal experience immediately. I don't know what the best way, I was transformed in a way immediately, but I didn't know how to say anything. So when we got done, as is typical, I found out when people have a tendency to accept Christ in their heart, nothing really much happens, and they just go on and say they did it and so forth. But something significantly happened to me, and I had been lit up, and I just thought, wow, I just felt really awkward. I didn't know what to do with it. It was surreal. So I just thought if I went to bed that night that I'd wake up in the morning and this feeling, this thing that was going on would go away, that this couldn't last. I literally felt euphoric. I had this euphoric feeling. I couldn't tell the counselor what had happened because I was still trying to understand what was going on. But something had severely shifted inside of me. And like I said, I felt like a Roman candle inside. So the next morning I did wake up, and that feeling was still there. And so I was just amazed because, I'd come from a life where good feelings didn't last, that I didn't expect good feelings to last. I came from a life where, what was the next thing that was going to happen that was going to be tragic in my family, or to a situation or somebody had done, or what had I done to get in trouble one more time, being a troublemaker kid, I guess, so to speak. So I was used to things, not the good things not lasting and the bad things seeming to be more present in my life. And as I came back from that church camp, and I had experienced that church camp for the rest of the week, it stayed with me. And the next day I woke up and the feeling was still there. And I'll never forget the bus ride home and just being blown away that the feeling was still there. This wonderful feeling of being consciously aware of Christ all the time. It was never a disconnect. It's something I learned today. It was a living relationship. My relationship was alive. As a child, it had come to me, I'm sure, out of the innocence. I hadn't passed puberty yet. So there was a lot of innocence there, and a troubled child. So I had a miraculous experience. I went home, and it stayed with me. And the 11th year of my life was one of the best years of my life. I called it the golden year, where everything I touched, I had this Midas touch. My school grades immediately lifted. All the sports that I was doing, I immediately became more proficient at them. I was kinder to people. I always was talking to Christ inside my head. And now I call that a living prayer relationship that I have today with God and Christ. but I was in fact talking to Christ like I would talk to God today, as I have that wonderful relationship with God, that I am one with my Creator. God and I are one, and I live that way, and I've built that. That's part of the story will come later. But I had this amazing year. And then in my 12th year, unfortunately, everything crashed and burned. Not that I was predicting it or wanting it. As a matter of fact, I was very surprised. But believe it or not, my mother came up to me and my sister. My brother was away at college at the time and said that she had sold the house that we were living in, that I grew up in my entire life up till that age of 12. And that she was leaving with this man that she had met in AA. She was an alcoholic and she'd gotten sober. She'd met a man in AA, and that the statement was, well, if I can't take care of myself, I can't take care of you. So I need to take care of me at this point in my life. So I've called your father, who I have never really talked to or had really any interaction as a kid. I'd seen him maybe less than a handful of times throughout my life. So as I heard this news, I've called your father, and if he doesn't come and pick you up, then you're going to be on the streets, were the words that she used for me, which, a kid that grew up in this town that was a pretty good town, being the poor kid, but it still was a good town, was just shocking to hear a mother, even at that age, at the tender age of 12, that I look up and just think, what kind of mother would abandon their children and think that it's okay and it's justified? But in fact, it's surreal, just like a kid. And as a kid, you just go with whatever it is because you have no choices anyway, right? You're just kind of mushed where you're mushed, and you go where you go. And so as a child, I was, and my sister and I stayed there. My mom ended up leaving 2 days after that. I stayed there for a couple of weeks with my sister. My father ended up showing up out of the blue. We had no idea what to expect. He did show up and said, grab your things, let's go. I got a place for us to live. We're going to live, and let's go. So it was kind of just an unannounced thing. We got in the car, we went, and all of a sudden I was living with this man that I had no real relationship with, and I didn't know who he was. He was a fireman, a real bravado, macho guy, big husky guy, known for being a tough guy. John Wayne was his mentor, so he liked to act like John Wayne. Just really rough, macho, womanizing, alcoholic man. My mother was an alcoholic. My father was an alcoholic. So they were both alcoholics. My father was more of the bar fly mentality for sure. And so as I went and lived with him, being as that I didn't know who he was and really didn't have any relationship prior to that with him. When I went and lived with him, obviously there was some conflicts that came up right away within the first month. And within that first month, I didn't know what was going on. I was taken out of the home, the town that I grew up in. It was really traumatizing for me. Sports were my only outlet, and he ended up taking sports away from me. So all those years of emotions of not having a father, whatever you want to call it, I blew up on him because he took baseball away from me, which was my favorite thing to do at the time when I was a child. And I was really, really pretty good at it. So I got a lot of identity out of it. When he took it from me, it was almost like the biggest gut punch I personally had as a child and as a life that I had lived. And so I got upset and yelled and screamed at him and told him that he wasn't my father. I didn't know who he was. I never even met him. I'd never want to be like him, and that he was a horrible human being. And how could he take my one thing that I loved away from me after all that I was going through, being that I had moved out of the town that I lived in my whole life. And he sat there and listened to me as I spouted off all these years of pain and suffering that I had no idea were going to come out, and didn't say a word, and proceeded to go back in the house, came back out with a belt and started beating the heck out of me. And he beat me pretty much daily from that point on. Became sort of like a weird something went off in him. I can't really tell you what, but he and I now were bumping heads. He was going to try and conquer me, and I was going to try and defy him. So it was a tumultuous relationship, to say the least. And it was basically daily beatings that started from that day on. They became daily. We moved to another place, and the neighbors heard me screaming, from the beatings, because you scream when you're getting beat. My dad was a big guy, and it certainly hurt. So, the neighbors had come to me and said, what's going on? Concern for a child that's obviously being beat next door. So listen, that's not okay. Parents can't do that. That's against the law. And I certainly was looking for some help, some relief. I'm sure that God had brought my neighbor in to help transition or to change this, because I was starting to really be affected, deeply affected by the trauma of being beat daily, not to mention the mental anguish and the games that he liked to play. Because it wasn't just physical. Of course, he had his own issues, so he would mentally try and challenge me. And I, I wasn't unintelligent child, so I knew how to kind of talk back, or hold my own, or argue, or be a little bit more defiant, if you will. Now, with him being a big guy, and I was scared of the death of him, I wasn't that defiant. Don't get me wrong. But what I did do is obviously have a conflict and a lot of confliction. And the only reason I'm going into this part of it is I had clearly been traumatized. And what happened for me is I started having nightmares from these beatings. And the nightmares would come, regularly every single night. And I would wake up and go into my sister's room, who was 3 years older than me. So she was my older sister. And I would be crying and upset and just, having these horrible, horrible nightmares. And the one nightmare that really threw me for a loop and traumatized me, one night I had dreamed that he was the devil and his girlfriend was one of his followers, and that I was being subjugated by them, that they were, going to take over, try and take me over and bring me to the dark side, if you will. And I woke up that next morning, and I guess the night was so rough, and I had certainly woke up with sweats and trauma and things like that, and bawling my head off. But I woke up that next morning after that event and after that dream, and I couldn't move. My body was literally cramped up from being so tense in the dreams and that traumatic dream state that I had to go to the bathroom just horribly bad, because you sleep really hard, I guess, when you're in that kind of trauma, when you have nightmares. And so when I came up and I tried to stand up, I just collapsed to the ground. So that all had kind of all culminated. And that next day that this went down, my father was going to beat me, and the neighbor had talked to me. So I told the neighbor, expect me to be calling soon. Of course, that night he was going to hit me. So I ran out the door, ran to the neighbors, and they called the police. And the police came, and that proceeded to become a life of foster homes, group homes. My parents, both of my parents, awarded the state custody of me. They released custody of me. I'll never forget, what a terrible moment as a grown man and a father today, to think of, these two adults walking out of a courtroom. Here I am, just a 12-year-old kid sitting on a bench in a place for abused children. It's called Albert Sitton Home for Abused Children. It's in Orange County. I believe it still exists. And them two parents walking out the door knowing they just signed over their child to the state, and I was the child. So it was really, I'll never forget that traumatic moment, and thus became this, world and life journey that I was going to head on, that had no idea where it was going to end up, and it didn't look good. It didn't look good at all. Institutionalization at that age and being around the kids that were like that was horrible. It was shocking to my system. A lot of mental illness, a lot of abused children. And in that environment, there's a lot of broken children, obviously. That's how they end up there. And parents, there's some, adults that don't really raise their children well. Well, I was one of them, and I was around a bunch of those children. So that affected me for a long time. And when I became a ward of the court, I ended up going through the system, and in going through the system, I ended up running away. And as I ran away, I got into trouble, and to survive, I would burglarize houses or, break into cars and things like that to try and make money, to buy food, or to get money so I could get food and stuff like that. I was living in garages of friends of mine that had cars, specifically a couple garages were broken down cars, and then the cars were in the garage, so they just sat there. So I would sleep in the back of the car when the parents went to bed, and then I would leave before the parents got up and were there during the day. And then that was my life, and I lived on the streets. And then living on the streets and burglarizing houses, I ended up getting caught and spent about 2 years of my life in juvenile hall as a teenager. Overall, I escaped from juvenile hall. I was definitely the one that was always getting in trouble no matter where I went. I guess God gave me some intelligence even at that age that I didn't know I had. So I would intellectually figure things out and ways to cheat the system or to get around the system. Of course, that just led to more trouble. And as it became more trouble, when you're on the streets, it's about, I'm a teenager now living on the streets, drinking, smoking pot. I wasn't doing hard drugs, but I was certainly involved in that kind of lifestyle. So that became just automatic that, you smoke, you drank, and you did those things. I did. And in doing that, I started building a character. I started becoming somebody now that I never, never knew as a kid, but I started becoming a byproduct of my environment and of all the trauma that had gone on. So as I got to the point in my life, when that event happened, I want to go back to that Christ moment when my mother told me that she was leaving and that she was going to leave my sister and me behind, unless otherwise my dad picked me up or we'd be on the street. That's when I felt that that connection with Christ had broken or gone away or wasn't there anymore, and I wasn't able to maintain it. So that's when it ended, and that's why I remember that. That's why that story was so important. So as I become a young man and a teenager, I start to have a desire to get high all the time. It was just escape from the feelings and do whatever I could to not feel the trauma of my life and the life that I had come from and the world that I lived in, and then telling people or thinking that I was okay, I survived it. And the reality of it is I didn't survive it well. I didn't come out of it untarnished. I was very much scarred. I was very much hurt. So as an 18-year-old, in about my 18th, 19th year, I got into the movie industry as a runner. And that was a big break for me. That was finally, I had caught up, and now working in a business that I'd only, watched TVs and dreamed of. And now I'm working in the movie industry, and then working in the movie industry, it gives me a sense of identity. I'm feeling a little more like, a sense of value, but I'm still partying and drinking. And now I wanted to get back to some of those teenage years too. I had gotten DUIs. I had acquired 3 DUIs by the time I was 20 years old. I had one when I was 16, one when I was 18, and one when I was 20. So I'd already had 3 DUIs by the time I was 20. I got, sober for a year. And then I started back up again when I was 21 and continued to start partying. And I continued partying and started that lifestyle up again. And it just gets worse year after year after year. It becomes a part of your lifestyle, who you are and the way you think and the way you operate is all about where I'm going, what bar we're going to go to, and where can I get drunk, and always being the tough guy and the guy that come out from the streets, and at the same time good looking, handsome, good personality, but tough boy, bad boy. That's kind of was my image. That's what I had grown up as a rough kid. So when I turned 27 years old, I had gotten 2 DUIs in my 27th year, 3 weeks within each other, and that was my crashing point personally. 5 DUIs in a lifetime, and I'm only 27 years old. Not to mention, I had 7 driving under suspended driver's license during that whole wreck. I literally went to, my life was threatened, and I went back to jail as an adult now. I'm not a teenager anymore, so it's not juvenile hall. Now it's jail. As I got that one when I was 20 years old, they took me to jail. That was, I was like, wow, that was really, you would think enough of a wake-up call. But now here I am, 27 years old. I've got 2 DUIs. My life is a mess. I am working in the movie industry, but I'm really not excelling because I don't have anything together. I'm a good worker, but at the same time, I got an attitude. I'm dealing with dysfunctional stuff that I haven't attended to. So I'm not a spiritually sound person. I don't have any spiritual development. And finally, when I got those 2 DUIs, I knew it was time for me to stop drinking and drugging. And that for me meant to get sober. And so I proceeded to go to recovery, get into recovery, and joined up in the AA crowd, which my mother was sober, so I knew of AA. And I was kind of came in that way, being familiar with it, started going to meetings, stopped the drugs and the alcohol, went through a lot of awkwardness my first year, that's for sure, not doing drugs and alcohol. And I had to find out for me at that time what I was going to do with my life, because I was probably emotionally still 12 years old. I had not really grown up. So I'm in a 27-year-old man's body, but even my body was still immature, still growing, evolving because of I'm sure the stunted youth. But at 27, I was clearly immature. I didn't have much going on. I had no education. The only thing I knew was how to work in lighting and grip as in the movie industry. Which was good stuff indeed, but it wasn't enough to carry you through in this world. So I was an unhappy, unsettled young man. And in terms of that, once I got sober, I thought that my whole life would change and everything would be okay. And then I come to find out just being sober would not take care of my problems. It would not heal the trauma that had gone on inside me. But by being sober, I had an opportunity to address that trauma, but I had no idea how to do that. I just thought you were just supposed to go to AA meetings, and that's the way it was. The rest of your life, you just went to AA meetings, and it seemed like a sanctuary for me. Once I got sober, that, I started doing a different society and hanging around people that were sober and really embracing that lifestyle. And I just figured, as it's represented in AA, like once you come in, there's no exit door, so you never leave. But I was hungry. And in terms of that, when I first got sober, I was totally confused, but I was hungry to try and change my life. Now, at 45 days of sobriety, I'm working a little bit, picking up a little jobs here. I acquired a motorcycle. I had got a buddy of mine, to sell me his motorcycle and make payments on it and so forth. But remember, I had a suspended driver's license. I still had a suspended driver's license. So anyway, I wasn't supposed to be riding a motorcycle, but I'm 45 days sober, riding around on my motorcycle. Of course, as we have it, I turn on a light and a police officer tries to pull me over and I take off. And I'd never run from the police before, but I had 7 DUI, 7 suspended driver's license, 5 DUIs. And I'm thinking, no way, man, I can't get caught. I cannot get another ticket. So I ran and I proceeded to run, and I was like those chases you see on TV now, the helicopters, 20 squad cars. They were chasing me around this neighborhood, and I'm running around on this motorcycle, screaming around my neighborhood. And, I'm running from the police, literally. And, your nerves are up, your fears are up, you make mistakes, all kinds of things happen. Somehow, by the grace of God, I ended up evading them, getting away from them, and got into my garage at my house. And was in there for about a half hour, and the police drove around the neighborhood trying to find me, but I had obviously disappeared. And then some kid poked his head up and said, "Hey, I saw him. He went in there," and they pointed at my house and where I had gone in and parked the motorcycle. So, needless to say, the police came, they arrested me, and now I'm in jail, sober, right? Thinking, well, if I'm sober, I'm going to be okay. Well, I'm sober, and now I'm going to jail. It's a felony evasion. So it's not just a little ticket, it's a felony. And it's like, felony, you can't vote. A lot of things are bad on felony. So I certainly was just like, oh my God, how did this happen? But I decided to stay sober. I wanted to stay sober no matter what. I was going to go through this. I had been sober, so I fought it out. I went to court. I got sent to county jail. I ended up going to the big house, the jailhouse, county jail, which is not fun. It's very barbaric. It's a very rough place to be. It was the last taste that I needed for sure of institutionalization. I was already deathly afraid of being in prison the rest of my life, because that was the path I was on. That was the destiny that was written up for me based on probation officers and people that were around me as a teenager when I was living on the streets and going through foster homes. Like, you're kind of set up to be end up one of those people that's going to become a bad person and end up in prison for the rest of your life. So, it was sort of like predestined. And in that sense, I didn't expect to be there. I learned a lesson. I stayed sober and I got out of jail. And in staying sober, I started to be hungry. I wanted to learn more. And I met my first mentor. And my first mentor taught me about my mind. He taught me about a broken mind, and that my mind could be the same mind sober as it was when I was drinking and using if I didn't change the character that I was. And started teaching me about character, and that we're all a character. We all represent some kind of character in life. And the character that I represented was a character that had DUIs and all his track record and all his history. So I was a broken character. There was a lot of pain and suffering and trauma in that character that I had become at 27, now 28 years old, as I'm getting sober. And, I had met my first mentor at about 2 years of sobriety. I was hungry for more, and God put him in my lap for a reason. And he helped me to understand the difference between a praying God and a living God, which is a lot to do with the home study course and the Russell cosmogony. It's about a living God, not just a praying God that we pray to in the morning and at night, but a coexisting God where you have a relationship that's alive, it's organic. And my first mentor taught me about that living God, that I needed a living God to build a new character, that I had lacked the power to build a new character. And that the only way that I could change my life would be to live by a code. And that code was going to be these 12 steps. So I just embraced myself in them. I dove into them, and I became, my mentor was an expert at them, an absolute expert. And I adopted everything he knew. I studied him like the dying would seize a life preserver. I chewed on every word. I pondered with him all the time. And then, at about 4 years of sobriety, so I was with my first mentor for 2 years. I had been going to a business meeting, and I had some time to kill, and I ended up going to this bookstore. It was a spiritual bookstore. And so in going to this bookstore, I was just, looking around the racks, and I went to the sale box. It was this huge box, imagine a box like a trash can size, but square. And it had a bunch of pamphlets in it, paperback pamphlets. And so I'm looking through and trudging through. I mean, there's hundreds and hundreds of books. They're all about 80 pages to 100 pages that were there. And one of the books was The Man Who Spoke to the Flowers. And that was about George Washington Carver. And I noticed that several of the books were written by this author named Glenn Clark. And there was another book that I saw that really caught my eye. And it was a book called The Man Who Tapped the Secrets of the Universe. And it was a pamphlet. It was a paperback. So it wasn't this hard copy. Like, these are cool. But mine was just this little orange paperback. And it was, it was even smaller than this. And I sat there and I just loved the title. And so I opened it up, the first page. And all of a sudden I started reading about the potential of myself, of that I knew that I was capable of more. I knew that I was capable of having a better life. And I had learned enough from my first mentor to realize that I was up against my mind. And then I picked up this little book that Glenn Clark wrote about this man called Walter Russell, and about his legacy and the life that he lived as a, brilliant, genius, illuminate man that had since childhood had these experiences. And somewhat to the one, like I said, when I was 11, I had a very deep spiritual experience. Dr. Russell had these experiences starting at 7, and he would have them every 7 years, and interspersely between those 7 years, certain images. But every 7 years on his birthday, he would have these revelations and go through this transformation. And that's what he wrote about in this book, and A Man Who Tapped the Secrets of the Universe, of how his whole life had been dedicated to the arts, that he had started at a young age by playing the piano as an infant, which I'm like, are they milking the cow here? How can this be possible? No one plays the piano as a 1-year-old, and come to find out that it is true. And that, he had these talents, innate talents that were beyond what most kids had, that he didn't hang out with other kids, that he always felt outside of them. But where he felt at home was in nature. And so he talked about the great amounts of time that he spent in nature. And I wasn't against nature at all in any way. I just didn't really understand how that part of him tapped in and what that meant to tap into nature. But I was certainly starting my spiritual life and starting to incorporate spiritual things into my life. So this was just perfect, tailor-made for me, because here was my new mentor. Someone, and that was so brilliant about this man is he kept insisting. And the great line is that genius is self-bestowed and mediocrity is self-inflicted. And so, for that was so important, is that genius is self-bestowed, that he was carrying a message that we all have ultimate genius within us. We have all power, all presence, and all knowledge within us. I call it the 3 omnis, and so did Doc. Omnipresent, omniscient, and omnipotent. So in those three omnis, and the way that Doc had broken down, was a way for me to build a better relationship with God than I ever thought possible. That the omnipresence meant that in nature I could always touch God. I could always feel the presence of God. And this started this revolutionary look at this man's life. He was a painter. He, as a child, he was doing drawings. His story about him growing up and doing these things, just wonderful things as a kid. Had to quit school at 10 years old and started working at the local grocery store to support his family. So he had no academic education, but took up into the arts as a young man, started drawing, was playing the piano at that point, taught lessons at the local church, made money that way. So he was already developing sort of his artistic qualities, and spent a bunch of time in nature. And as he's telling the story, he started not being interested in kids his age. He started hanging out with the adults and wanted to learn more. So anyway, I'm trying to learn more, and and so what the thing for me that I'm trying to get to is that as I'm reading this story, I stand there and I read the whole book. I got a meeting. I didn't skip the meeting, but I was certainly late to the meeting. But I read this whole book from front to cover, and I knew I needed to read this more a bunch of times, because that's what I was taught by my first mentor. I was taught how to read for my life. Not just read like a novel, close the book and go, okay, I read that, and maybe remember a couple things from it, but really never process it. And that's what Walter Russell talks about. If you ever want to know anything, contemplation of that thing is greater than, you could contemplate a book you've read for an hour, and you'll get more of that hour out of it than if you read a whole library full of books. It was about contemplation, and it was about taking in this way of life and incorporated it into a living relationship with what I call God in my life today, and the omnipresence, the omniscient and omnipotent elements of God. So omnipresence to me is where God's everywhere. And Walter talks about how at an early age he always felt in touch with nature, and that he would have these illuminations, and he saw colors and vivid dreams and have all these experiences. And as he grew up, he became a bellboy. And as a bellboy, he wouldn't take tips because he wanted to be the best bellboy there ever was and never take a tip. And, the stories that go on about his life, and he just lived a superior life from a very young age. And I was just enamored at how did he know how to do these things? How did he know how to keep moving this way? And he worked at a hotel as a bellboy to put himself through art school. So he paid for art school, and he educated himself in art, not academic education, but he went to art school and paid his own way through art school. And then he started getting little jobs at the hotel, people wanting to do portraits for him. So that turned into another way of income producing for him. So as the more that he produced in the arts, the more he gave himself to the arts, the more arts gave back to him. And he became a portrait painter. And his most famous run was he painted the most beautiful children in America, and that was one of his contracts. And so he had become such an amazing painter of portrait painters of people and portraits that the Women's Society decided they wanted to have him do a book on the most beautiful children in the world. So to me, this was fascinating, that this man's life just seemed to have so much momentum and so much Godlight in it, and that he kept saying, and what I do, you can do. There's nothing that I'm doing that any man or woman is not capable of doing. I'm no different than anybody else. And he would explain how the greatest geniuses and mystics throughout time have always known that. And you can kind of relate to those times I've heard where Christ say, do not worship me, but worship the Father within me. And you are all sons and daughters of the Most High. This man was able to help me see that he kept impounding in me that I had everything I needed inside me. The light was inside me, that I needed to be in touch with that light. And that in being in touch with that light meant that it was something that wasn't something I went to here and there, but it was something I co-created, that my hands became God's hands. I invited God into my thought life. And that's where Dr. Russell talks about the importance of thought energy, that when he would do something, he was going to do a project, he would put thought energy into it. So I started hearing these terms about thought energy and about how important our thoughts are, and that, and then we started that movement about thoughts become things, and it's been going on for many years, but this is where it landed for me about, and my first mentor had taught me about my mind was hurt, that I had an injured mind from my childhood, from the life that I lived. And so my thought life was corrupt and it was full of trauma, and that I acted in ways that I couldn't stop myself from acting unless I made a change of character, unless I had a change of character and learned what that meant. And that's what those 12 steps became about. That threw me into the man who tapped the secrets of the universe. I was extremely hungry at that point for the next level. And the man who tapped the secrets is exactly what did that for me. It took me to the next level. In terms of that, what it did for me is it changed the way I looked at Ken, the way that Ken could be perceived in this world, what Ken was capable of, not just being sober and go to meetings for the rest of my life, but live a brilliant life, to awaken that genius. And I don't know about you, but I know for me, there has always been a voice, which we all have inside of us, I believe, that says, I'm meant to do something. There's something special for me in this life. There's more. I'm supposed to go for more. I didn't feel that I had measured up to the man that I was supposed to be, certainly not at that point. But I think we all have that inside of us, that there's something special for each and every one of us to do, and there is. And I've come to realize that we all have a unique path. So what this book did for me is it helped me to realize that genius was inherent in me, that I could, in fact, live a life of genius. And to me, I wanted to start now. I wanted to figure out how to do that. So as I read that book, I proceeded to read it for 6 weeks straight, every day, multiple times a day at times. And then I would meditate on it. Then I would ponder on it. Like I said, contemplation, which was the biggest form of really truly understanding what was being, the message that was being carried by the man who tapped the secrets of the universe. And the message that was being carried to me was, you have just but begun to recognize your capabilities and how much there is for you to do in this world and in this life. And that this man at 77 years old reinvented himself. At 59 years old, changes modalities from sculpting to from painting to sculpting. Never sculpted in his life. But an assignment came up, someone didn't fulfill it, and it was the Mark Twain bust. And so he was now to go and said, I'll do it. I'm going to do it myself. Something inspired him to say, I'll sculpt it. Now, he was known as a famous painter. So people were telling him, this could kill your career. This could kill your career by changing modalities like this. But he did it anyway. And that's what he was explaining, explaining about the God light. That with God, anything is possible. Any concept, any achievement, anything you want to do can be done as long as you connect to that God light inside of you. That nobody had more God in them than anybody else. And the way he related to me that I thought was best is that it's not like one man is born or woman's born with a thimble full of God and another man or woman's born with a bucket full of God. We're all born with the same amount, the same potential. That amount and that potential, think about it, is omnipresent, omniscient, and omnipotent. There is no limiting in that concept, in that which we define as God. Now, God is defined that way in whatever race, religion, or whatever philosophy you look at. It's always omnipresent, everywhere, all the time. Always centering everything. It knows everything. That's omniscient. And it has all power. That's omnipotent. So God is the same for all of us. There is no different God. Whatever you want to call it, it still represents the same thing. So for me, in terms of going back into that younger years as I'm sober, I ended up meeting a woman, and I ended up getting married because, I'm 28, 29 years old now, and I need to be fixed. Really, that's what I want. Why I got married. What I saw in women was hopefully they were going to fix me. I would never tell them that, but that's what my angle was. I'm sure none of you can relate to that, but that's what I got in relationships, to see if they can fix me or help me or make me a better person or fix this hole in my life, which represented my gut, my heart. I just had a hole that I walked around with, not feeling like I was ever at my true potential. So always wanting someone to come in and save me, but there was no one to come in and save me. That's what Walter Russell was teaching me, that if I wanted to be saved, then I needed to save myself. And that the way that I could save myself was to know God within myself, to know that light, that divine spark of light that centers all things in God's universe. Everything is centered by the all presence, all knowing, an all-powerful God that we call God. Everything, whether it's a leaf, whether it's a flower, a tree, a cloud, a raindrop, a molecule, an atom, a galaxy, a nebula, the sun, it doesn't matter. It's all centered by, all of it is centered by omnipresence, omniscience, and omnipotence, in that I could build a relationship with this power, and that power would be called God for me, God in my life. And so when I got married, I ended up getting married, and I married a woman that I didn't think I loved, believe it or not. But I thought I was so broken that maybe I just didn't know what love was. She was very pretty, so I thought that, that works, and she was intelligent and so forth. But the reality of it is there wasn't quite that connection that I've come to realize and learn with love. And the reason it wasn't there is because I wasn't ready for love. I wasn't capable of giving love. And I found out in life now that if you want love, you must give it. And that you don't get loved back, you're re-given love. Whatever you give, you're re-given. And that is what Walter Russell has taught me, is that if you want something, first give it, and then know you'll be re-given it. So, and if you hurt one man, you hurt every man. He started helping me realize that God was universal, that man and woman were universal when they know their universality, and that we could learn that, and that anybody could start now. And that there was these books written by there. In The Man Who Tapped the Secrets, it was written in 1946, so they had not released the home study course yet. That came out in 1951, but he was talking about the literature that he had been working with, the Divine Iliad 1 and 2, and those other things. And so as I was reading Glenn Clark's book, and he's mentioned this library, like there was a lot of other books, I was like, oh my God, gold mine. I've struck gold. I want to know more, and I want to read more of his material. Because in that 6-week period, going back to that 6-week period that I studied this book day in and day out, and moment in and moment out, and meditate on it and contemplate on it, I had an experience. I had an illumination in a meditation. And, that's for another topic. I will actually put that down on a podcast at some point, my illumination. I've had many of them. That was the most powerful one. I don't know if it's powerful one. That was the most profound because it was the first. And that illumination took me to a place where I literally saw the God light within myself, to wrap it up in a nutshell. And so I knew I was onto something. Something was changing in me. And I was starting to become aware of things again, like that 11-year-old, that I knew things that I shouldn't have known. I was tapping into things that I shouldn't tap into. After that illumination, I had this just amazing feeling of ecstasy, and tears of joy were rolling down my face after this illumination. And for 30 straight days after that, and part of that illumination, I saw the God light in human eyes, in people's eyes. And I saw it in everybody's eyes I looked at in that meditation illumination. So that God light centers everybody's eyes, and I was able to see it. When I came out of that meditation for the next 30 days, every person I came across, I could see the God light in their eyes. I could look at them and see the God light, just like I'm looking at you right now, believe it or not, and I can see the God light in your eyes. See, it's a light not like the luminosity we think of a light bulb. The God light is constant. It's always available to each and every one of us. It doesn't go on and off. It doesn't travel. It's constant. So I found out for me that what had happened to me and why I had fallen in such a deep hole is I lived purely through my sense self, through my instincts, and that's where my trauma was. That I had tried to find happiness through the body, which the body would know no happiness, because there's not enough money, there's not enough romance, and there's not enough recognition in life from society to satisfy those sense feelings of society, sex, and security. There's just not enough. Think about it. It's like thinking I'm going to eat a meal and it's going to be so much food and it's going to be so filling that I'm never going to have to eat again. That's just not even fathomable, right? Well, trying to be happy through money, through fame, through relationships, through other situations, you're never going to find happiness through your body. True happiness lies in your heart. And my heart is where I live. And that's what my first mentor taught me. And that's what Walter Russell taught me, is my heart is where I live. And so after reading this book and having this experience for 30 days, I just wanted more. And as I wanted more, I started looking up, where can I find this work, this Divine Iliad? And the names were different now. Now they had changed the names of the university. It used to be called the Walter Russell Foundation when it first started. And as I was reading the book that I had, the pamphlet I had was in reference to the Walter Russell Foundation. Thus, probably why it was in the sale box, because it wasn't pertinent anymore, since it didn't have the address anymore, nor the proper name of the foundation. But I know that God took me to that book. You know, we have those moments in life. And I want to reassure you, we'll have them, you have them. There is no time. It's never too late. Stop. You know, those things went through me and they go through us, and they're part of that sensed lie. Believing my body is who I am. You know, I've come to realize, if my body is who I am, how come I don't feel any older inside? See, and therefore my spirit is eternal. That mind is only one mind, and we are all the mind of God. We confuse, and that's what Walter Russell has helped me to recognize, that I confuse my body as me, when my body is nothing more than a vehicle for my consciousness. It's just like your body is nothing more than a vehicle for your consciousness. So it's your consciousness that makes your life. It's not your body. But as a human beings, and the things that I learned, it was about the fast car, the houses, and who had the money, and who hung out with the right crowd. That was where happiness lied, in fame, fortune, and all these things. But that's the biggest lie we've ever been told. Happiness lies in having fulfilling relationships, is what I've come to learn. And what I had learned, the problem in my life was, I had a total inability to form a true partnership with another human being because of the trauma that I had in my life, because of the experiences I had. I had blocks that were up that I didn't even know they were up. I didn't enter into a relationship thinking, what can I give? I would enter into relationships thinking about, what do I get out of this? Where's my angle? How do I benefit from this? So in terms of that, I realized that for my life, that I had some changing to do, but I had a roadmap now. Now I had this roadmap, and looking for this message and wanting more materials, I couldn't find any information. This was pre-internet days, so I had to do my research and call around and do some 411s. And I ended up getting a hold of Glenn Clark's daughter. I don't even know. I called the publisher who published the books. Then they told me that Glenn Clark had passed, had refolded, but that his daughter was still around and that they were willing to give me her number. So I ended up calling Glenn Clark's daughter, and as God would have it, she was just about as sweet as an angel. She was kind. She knew exactly who I was talking about, and she relayed to me that her father, Glenn, thought Walter Russell was absolutely one of the most amazing men he had ever met. He spoke of him all the time. They were good friends, and that you know, she had a lot of respect for him and all the works that they had done, that she was very familiar with his works, and that the foundation had been changed from the Walter Russell Foundation to the University of Science and Philosophy. And so thus from that point, I was able to find the University of Science and Philosophy in 98 and started proceeding to do those things. As I learned more about Walter Russell, I started believing and knowing that what he was saying was the truth. And the more I believed, the more I knew, and the more I knew, the more I wanted to believe, and each was feeding the other. So when I looked and I realized he started playing the piano at a young age, and that, you know, this message of nobody's born a musician, nobody's born an artist. The desire might be there, but you have to learn, acquire the skills of reading music or playing the piano, and then learn how to make music, which was a whole nother level outside of the mechanics that anybody can mechanically learn how to play music. So here I am, a grown man, and I had just thought my whole life that I had no musical talents, that I just wasn't musical. That just wasn't a part of my DNA, my family. No one in my family was. I hadn't been around it. So I just assumed I wasn't. But I loved the piano. As I was a young man, I listened, even in my partying days, I still listened to piano music. I liked it back then. So it was in me. And as I started to live in recovery and started living by the message of the home study course and the Russell cosmogony, my life started to transform, and doors were opening up. And I decided the music was inside me and that I wanted to play the piano, and I heard it inside me. I sat down, and within a week, I was playing music that people could not comprehend how I was able to play music that made sound, that had harmony to it with just playing for 1 week. And that was it. That was just the beginning of what's ignited me to this day. I still play. I love the piano. I did it because Walter Russell had done it. And he talked about how he loved to improvise. And I'm an improviser. I did learn how to read music to a little bit of an extent. I'm nowhere near as proficient as a lot of people that I know, but the bottom line is I could be. That's a technical skill, learning how to read music. But playing music, that's a whole nother level. That comes from God. So the music was inside me because I had pondered it and listened to it. So when I sat down on that piano, it's kind of like what Walter Russell has taught me. It's you learn in the doing. If you wait to do it until you learn it, you'll never do it. You learn in the doing. And that, so I started to sit down and play piano. And as it would turn out, I had the woman I married loved horses. So we ended up getting horses, and that made her happy. So I wanted to make her happy. So we ended up acquiring horses. And as I read Walter's story, I was inspired about him becoming a horseman and that he took it to the highest level. And I came to believe that was possible for me. And within a decade, I had raised a world champion. I had won the world show. That's me there showing one that's top 10. In the world, and that's in halter horses. So it's about the shape, the conditioning they look in, the small head, the long neck, and just the conformation. It's all about conformation. So I took it just like Walter, and he had bought horses from Roosevelt, the stables Arabians, and they were back then they were very expensive. So apparently he offered a man, he wanted this one black stallion. He said, offered the man $5,000, Huntington. Actually, from Huntington Drive down there, he's got a street in South Pasadena actually called Huntington Drive. Anyway, Mr. Huntington had these horses, and Walter Russell offered to buy one of them, and he said, "No, I'll only sell all of them, but I won't sell just one of them. And I want $50,000 for all of them." So Walter Russell said, "Okay, I'll take them all." And he ended up proceeding. And Roosevelt said, "What are you doing, Russell? You can't believe you just did this. You're going to have to buy truckloads of grain. You're going to need, truckloads of carloads of hay and grain and all this stuff and barns." And he said, "I'm going to do it and learn how to do it and learn how to do it while I'm making it happen. So I'll be just fine." He had no doubt that he was going to be able to succeed as a horseman, but he had never trained horses. He had never, other than playing with them and liking riding them, thought of himself as a trainer or a new breeding. He got into Arabs, and that level of horsemanship is top level. When you get into Arab horses, they're the oldest, and you get into these bloodlines that go way back, and that's why they're so expensive. But anyway, that horse endeavor, because of his helping me to believe that he could do it, and therefore I could do it, I did it. And I didn't know it at the time. It was something you look back on, you're just amazed that it happened. It unfolded. And it was unheard of from anybody to start in the horse industry and within 10 years create a world champion. That's just not heard of. Very uncommon. And I was not one of the richy ones. I was, in the horse industry that I probably shouldn't have been in. I couldn't afford to, because the horse industry is a losing. If you want to know how to lose money, they say in the horse world, if you want to know how to lose $1 million in the horse world, you start with 2. And that means you're going to lose 1, right? So it's not a winning business. And then I became a father. As I became a father, that's my son right there. As a young boy, he ended up being fascinated with snakes. And as I became a father, I had started transforming by that point. I had started incorporating this message that I was learning. I was becoming the man that I didn't know I could become, but I was becoming that man. And I started lecturing. I started incorporating the 12 steps with the home study course and the Russell Cosmogony. And I started doing that over 25 years ago. And I mean, it was almost like gold rush. I don't know how to explain it other than if you build it, they will come. Well, before I knew it, I started with 10 people, and then it was 15, then it was 20, and then it was 100, then it was 200, and it's standing room only, and people sitting on the floor to hear this message, the message that I'm sharing with you, which is the same message that Walter Russell talked about and that I learned from, which is how to aspire to never set any limitations for yourself that you wouldn't set on God. So if you believe God's unlimited, then you're unlimited. and that was a learning curve, and that was something you had to learn and desire to build. But any of us could build this kind of relationship, could build these things into our life that we never thought were possible. None of us were mandated to live a lowly life, and some of us live a high life. That's such a unfortunate part of programming. Well, if you come from a wealthy family, you got a lot easier, and it's tougher, for your poor, because you don't get the breaks, you don't get the door open. But there's that yin and yang. If you come from a wealthy family, you take everything for granted. When you don't have anything, you work your butt off and you appreciate everything and you strive for more. That's why a self-made man or woman is far greater than a family-made or somebody else, a factory-made man or woman. They don't work out, right? When just because it's just been true about famous families. Usually famous parents, if there's a famous parent, their children, the offspring, usually aren't famous because they're always in the shadows of their famous parent. But, this is something that you realize. So it's not just genetic. It's not a disposition. It's a desire force. It's a desire to learn and know more. And when you are ready, when the student is ready, the teacher will arrive. And that was when this book came into my life. At 4 years of sobriety, 3 to 4 years of sobriety, it changed my life. It was my on-ramp to the next level of where I was going to go for my life. This changed everything that I knew I was capable of. And I was already really serious about recovery and about helping people get into recovery. And I was an expert at these 12 steps. And people were coming to me to hear me talk about them. And at the same time, I was sharing the message of those 12 steps. I was incorporating everything I was learning from the home study course and all the Divine Iliads and all the books that I've read and keep reading to this day from the Russell Cosmogony. And when I got a hold of the Russell Cosmogony, man, this is for life. You can spend the rest of your life studying this. And I just knew I'm set for the rest of my life. I'm going to study this and work on this. And there is no finish line. There's no finish line. So I'm just going to keep going. But I have, and what is being offered to any one of you, if you're tuning into the Russell Cosmogony and the home study course, or Awakening Your Inner Genius, or the Cosmic Messenger Meetup, or you're affiliated with the University of Science and Philosophy, you have in your hands everything you need to create the life triumphant you've always dreamed of. And that's what, learn these new words like a life triumphant. Genius is self-bestowed. Mediocrity is self-inflicted. These kinds of terms are my vocabulary now because they're truths. And that I have come to realize and modified some things. And something that came to me was a long time ago as I studied this message through the 12 steps, I came up with what I believe was a great acronym, and it's called Thought Life Connection. And I call it TLC, and it's a coaching service that I do, and I help people in recovery get in recovery in private at home, so they're not relegated to going to AA meetings or going to the treatment centers and having to embarrass themselves or take off work or do all those things. And so God helped me to incorporate these two messages and start this corporation called Thought Life Connection. And the reason I call it Thought Life Connection came from the Russell Cosmogony, because Walter Russell always talks about our thought lives, that our thoughts create what we want. So adhere to and make sure that your thoughts are not just you and of yourself and of your body, but are incorporated with the light of God. Always invite the light of God into your thinking. And that's what I learned to do. Because when I got upset, I realized, that's what it means I took it back. I'm no longer with God. I'm upset now. I'm fighting and wrestling with the world, and I got to get back to God. So now I got to ask God to come back in and get me out. And the me out is that lower self. There's a higher self and a lower self. And I think maybe that's the voice inside that we all know, that we have a special destiny. That's your higher voice. And that voice is in every one of us. That's what makes us all one. And what also makes us all one is if we were all given the same principles to live by, and we lived by those principles, and they were the same principles, we'd all have different paths. That's what makes us all unique, and that's what also makes us all one. And the reason we're all one is because for God to be everywhere all the time, there could be no place where God isn't. That's what makes us all one, is that God light. And that's what I've learned through this message and what changed my life. So you can go to my website at thoughtlifeconnection.com, and you can take a look at some of my recovery work. And within there, you're going to be able to see a lot of the Russell Cosmogony. And I have over 100 lectures that are audio files that are there. I've got over 1,000 lectures in my library of audio files that we're uploading and continue to upload, along with some of my writings. And there's some free PDFs if you want to know more about how I integrated the two, how these two came together in my life. I'm now 34 years in recovery, and that's what and my mission in life has been to help people. Now I help people. Can you imagine a kid coming from the streets, living in juvenile hall, being taken out of his home for child abuse, ending up, helping people in life? And I've helped many, many people. As I said, I've had a large following for a long time. I haven't. It's the God in me. And I always give credit to God. And I'm sure that's why it all happened that way and it built up that way. Just like if you give the credit to God, there's no limit to what you're capable of. But the minute I take credit for something, it's almost like a shutoff valve to the God light, because now my egos come in, and ego will definitely take God out of any picture that you're having in your life. I had learned salutation to the day. And that is something that Walter actually wrote about Glenn Clark wrote about in the Manhattan Secrets of the Universe. Walter had told him that salutation today and Secret of the Light, he has been working on it. It hadn't come out yet because it was, again, prior to the publishing of it when Glenn Clark wrote this. But he had made mention of it. And in terms of that,
3-minute break.
In terms of that, the salutation of the day has become, for me, I read this stuff and I read it for my life. So it's not about parroting it or being a recorder and recording it, but it is about importing the words and the information and the knowledge and then pondering it throughout the day and applying it to my mind in the moment I'm in to change the way I'm looking at the world so that I see the world through the one still light of God, which represents two things that I've learned from this Russell cosmology and things that you don't necessarily get in the 12 steps is God is light and God is love. Well, Christ said that over 2,000 years ago. And Walter Russell always talks about, Leo Russell talk about, we didn't understand that Christ literally meant that God is love and God is light. And that is the two natures. Why do we have this universe? And I come to find out it's because God's expressing love. The love, when you have love in your heart and your heart is full of love, think about it. If you've ever had a moment where you felt loving or felt a love in your life, you're not trying to get anything. You're trying to give. When you feel good and you feel joyous, you want other people to feel good and joyous. Love is a motivator to try and share. It compels one to want to give to others, right? Love is something you give, not something you get. These are things that I've learned through applying the principle of this home study course. So we're going to take a 3-minute break, and then I can kind of get my bearings back in place, because when you tell your story like this, sometimes it can take you back into memory. So it's important to stay in the now and to keep staying with the message. So we'll take a quick break. Let me get my legs loosened up, and we'll be back here in 3 minutes. Thank you very much. My soul quickeneth with the telling of the coming of the new day. This day will be of my making, whether I choose to live it in spirit or in flesh, on the mountaintop are earthbound. My yesterday is what I made it, perfect or imperfect. I see it in memory only. My today is what I will to make it. I will to make it perfect. I have the power to build the day or rend the day. If I rend the day, I create mayhap, 10 times 10 to undo the rending. If I build the day, I will have lived the day in the fulfillment of the one purpose, which is God's purpose for my life. So I may meet the day with knowledge. These are the words with which I greet the day. This is the spirit of the dawn. To me, the universe is an open book. I need not learn, I shall know. I shall see the unseen from the mountaintops, and I shall hear the music of the spheres. I shall know the transcendental joy of creation. I shall know immortality. I shall bestow immortality. I shall have the power to give immortality to anyone who would ask. Would I reach my hand into the darkness and pull them into the light? And I shall keep my body charged for that purpose, which is my purpose to fulfill. The dynamic power of the universe shall be behind my thinking. Power shall be mine to give by the wayside. I shall not deny to any man that which is mine to give. I shall stand on the electrodes of the universe and command that which is universal. None shall stay the hand in building this day. I shall not haste the day, nor shall I waste the day, nor shall I pay any heed to the tomorrow. All things that I shall do today, I shall desire to do. My power shall be in knowing. My power shall be in thinking truth. My power shall be in humility. The taint of arrogance I shall not know. That which is I shall I keep within the shadow of the beautiful temple of modesty. But if that which I were to do were worthy, I shall send it forth, so my doing shall be true. Problems shall be as chaff before the wind. If perchance the day shall hand me anything bitter, it shall become sweet as I bring it to my lips. Truth will guide my footsteps through tortuous paths. From all that is unlovely shall my eyes be immune. I shall desire to see the beauty in all things. None shall stay my hand from building of this day. I shall meet in patience with patience, unkindness with kindness. Force shall I meet with gentleness. And my countenance shall reflect the spirit within me, so others can hearken to my song as I sing the day through with a glad song into the golden evening. And as I cross the threshold of this day, I cross it with joy and thanksgiving, wanting nothing else but thy light centering my mind. Amen. Welcome back. So you got to hear me recite Salutation to the Day. And there's a couple other passages, many other passages that I've committed to memory for the purpose of pondering. And there's so much in that statement, Salutation to the Day, that, you could just take one of those statements and break it down, and it helps you to understand a deeper revelation in life. As the dawn telleth to come in the new day, I purge myself in the beauty of the dawn. Purge, right? So I'm awakening my spirit, right? Purge myself in the beauty of the dawn. My soul quickeneth with the telling of the coming of the new day. Not my body, my soul. See, it's a soul life. We're supposed to live a soulful life, not a physical life. But we live in a world of duality. And I want to get back to why it was so important for me to take this message and bring it into my life, is because I had so much trauma in my life. What I had is a fault-finding mind, a mind that was hurt. And I say mind, and I mean brain, a brain that was hurt. And the way that it processed life was purely through the physical senses. And that's why I was unhappy. And that's what makes a human being unhappy, is when you try and live through the body, it's an endless perpetual, it's chasing your tail and trying to find happiness in your pocket rather than in your heart. So in terms of that, I learned Salutation today because, what am I looking at?
The quote.
Rita, thank you for sharing. So Rita has made a mention. Thank you for sharing, Ken. Quite the story. You just never know people's story and what they have endured. A lesson to not let your ego take you away from love and light. It also reminds us some people have endured much worse, but it is our path that our soul chooses to learn and heal. God bless you. Oh, thanks, Rita. That's really a special compliment, and I appreciate that very much. It means a lot to me. And that's another thing that I realize is how important people are. Life is about personal relationships. Life is about love, and love is something learned, and it's also about self-love. But try and go love yourself. You know what I mean? You know how I learned to love myself? By becoming a better man, by thinking about people in a better way. I realized that I wore faces everywhere I went. I had a mind, a brain that was never satisfied. It was always wanting more. I had a selfish, self-centered brain that always trying to think about what's my angle? What do I get out of this? And I would size people up and see what I could get out of them. I was still on the streets, even though I wasn't living on the streets anymore. I was in the city. I was in Disney. I was on studios, and I was still in the streets, living the same way that you live on the streets. If you think about the streets, you're not thinking about church and holy places. You're thinking about, how do I survive? How do I get mine? Kick them while they're down. Give it while the getting's good. Take when you can, well, the taking's worth getting, right? It's all about selfish self. And that's what I had also come to realize. So it doesn't matter how much trauma happened, how many things happened that were not my fault as a child, that didn't change that when I grew up, I brought that stuff with me. And that stuff that happens to us when we're children, it never goes away. So I have come to realize I either become aware of how it affects me today and in my life when it comes up, or it's just going to control me and continue to keep me in a world that I don't want to live in. See, I lived for so long, no matter what I did, new car, new job, new girl, new hanging out with different people. I always call it the 90-day wonder. Everything was good for about 90 days. And then on the 91st day, I was like, this ain't no good anymore. You know, I would get a new job and rave about how I loved the work I was doing. Everything was great. 91 days later, I'm talking about how they're overworking me. They're not paying me enough. The boss shouldn't be the boss. I should be the boss. And I got that fault-finding brain that kicks in, and I don't realize that's from trauma. That's from injury. That's not from a healthy place. That has nothing to do with the spirit or the soul or the light of love. It has to do with purely satisfying our body, my body. Right? Think about walking around this life only trying to satisfy your body and not even knowing that's what you're doing, and wondering why you're so miserable, why you're so empty inside, why I can't get over that injury when someone hurts me. You know, I'm the kind of person that if you hurt me or step on my toes, I'll never forget it, because I came from such a bitter, ugly life. I'll hang on to that resentment. I didn't realize it wasn't killing you, it was killing me. Resentments, there's a term for it. It's like drinking poison, thinking you're not going to get sick. When you hold resentments towards people, when you hold indignation, when you think, oh, my mother and father, they failed me, that's why I have this miserable life, or she broke my heart, or he abandoned me, or he cheated on me, or she cheated on me, and that's why I'm all screwed up. That's why I can't have relationships anymore. You know, and I found out that when you live purely in your brain and you don't awaken your soul and that divine light, that divine mind within you, then you're relegated to this three-dimensional world. And this three-dimensional world is just a stage. As I was saying earlier, what I've learned from this message is my body is nothing more than a vehicle, just like the car I drove in here. It's a vehicle. And if my centering consciousness didn't turn that key on, and my brain didn't tell me to put it in drive, then the car wouldn't move. But the car's not alive. It's just a bunch of wires and electricity running through it. Well, my body is not alive. It's just a bunch of wires and electricity running through it. It's organic, but it's not alive. And what I mean by that is that if it's alive, if it's real, then it has to be eternal, right? We get caught up in false realities. It's a false reality to think, oh, I got a great house, I got a great car, and I got a great relationship, and I do good with my fellows, so I'm a happy human being. That's not the truth. That's not possible. Happiness comes from feeling good about the world you live in. Well, if I keep thinking aggressive thoughts and how people don't measure up and how this doesn't measure up and how, you know, I get into places and I get uptight. I go to a grocery store and I'm impatient. I don't want to wait in line. I want to, you know, get there quicker, or I want to cut someone off, or I'm driving down the road and someone cuts me off and I take offense to it like it's my road and I want to chase them down the road and all these things. I didn't realize is that I'm living in a world where I'm fighting and arguing with everybody and everything. And I'm not fighting with them. I'm fighting in my head. My brain is fighting with them. And the reason that I'm fighting is from all that trauma that I never dealt with. And that's what this message is so beautiful about, is as we build this character from these principles that are outlined in this way of life in the home study course, the Divine Iliad, and all the other literature that comes with the Russell cosmogony. And I also include the 12 steps. As we start to live and shape our lives according to spiritual principles, everything changes. Then your spirit awakens. If you want to I found out for me, if I want to be a spiritually awakened, then I have to live from the spirit. And then I have to search. It's not just going to come out automatically. I have to ask questions. I have to ask people, how do you meditate? How do you talk to God? How do you stay in a relationship? How do you keep from going into fear? What if you lose your job? What if you lose your income? What if you lose your home? How do you keep from panicking and having faith? How do I trust? As Walter Russell lost $300,000 in 1907 crash, 300 grand, right? And the press came in and they come to him and, oh my God, you've lost all your money in the crash. Now what are you going to do? He said, well, God gave it to me one time, so God will give it to me again and show me how to earn it again. But was he worried? Was he sad? Did he accept defeat? No, that's what he said. I never accept defeat. I have met many things have gone wrong, but I learned from them. Therefore, it's not a defeat. I convert it into a lesson learned for life. So there is no more defeat. You never fail as long as you learn something from it. From that child that I just got done telling you about, the defeat was written all over my destiny and my life. But you know what? I dug in. And my light woke up, and I listened to other illuminates. I listened to other geniuses, and they woke me up. And so can you. And it's not about one person, it's about all of us. And again, I'm going to go back to this age thing. You're never too old to wake up. You're never too old to have a loving God in your life and live a loving life with the grace of God. You're never too old to recognize, maybe I should try and ask a different way of doing this. And maybe I should learn about the most confusing thing in my life was me. I didn't know me, yet I thought I did. If you asked me what I wanted, I would think I would know what to tell you. But if you really asked me what I wanted, I would have no clue, because I never really found out who I was because I was scared. I was broken inside. There was too much damage. I could never get to the truth and the joy of who I was because I was consumed in thinking I was broken from this sense life that I had been projected into without my authority. Life comes at us the way it comes at us. These are the cards that I was dealt. And these are the cards that Walter was dealt as a child. He had started working at 10. So it's not like he had some grace, but he did find that light, and discovering that light. The greatest joy in discovering that light is sharing it with others, is letting others know you're brilliant. You're not only brilliant, you're masterful at whatever you want to be masterful at. Just put love into whatever you do. And what I learned is it doesn't mean I love every moment of everything I do, but it does mean that I can put love into everything that I am doing. I don't think sweeping the floor, you could put love into it, but you can. You do it artfully. Whatever you do, menial task or a masterful task, you do it with honor and integrity. You do it to its fullest. The reason I had a half-baked life, the reason I didn't feel good about the world I lived in, it was because I was a taker, not a giver. I had to first learn to become a giver. And the first place to start giving is in your thoughts, in your feelings, and then in your actions. And I've learned that's why we call it thought-life connection. And Walter Russell cosmogony and Lael's cosmogony teaches us it's thought, feeling, action. The thought is just a thought until you give it energy. Energy is emotion, feelings, repetition, and then you take actions. So I was doing things, and I would always look up and go, why did it just do that? And the reality of it is I was doing things because I didn't know who I was. And I wasn't aware of my thought life. Are you aware of yours? And do you know, and I'll end on this, is that the average human being has 70,000 thoughts a day. So that means you're having about 4,500 thoughts every hour. Can you track that last hour and how many thoughts you've had and what those thoughts were? And then that's what I realized. It's too big of a job to just be a sense human being. I'd rather be a cosmic human being. And then I can realize the thoughts I've just had. I can tell you the thoughts I've just had, not by the specific thoughts, because they're infinite, right? They can be, if I'm stressed out, maybe they're 100,000, who knows? But what I can tell you is how I feel, which tells me my feelings are a byproduct of what I've been thinking about. So when I think with the glory of God in all things that I do, you ask me how I feel, you remind me that I'm connected to God, And I feel great. I'm doing great because you just reminded me to connect to God. I need these triggers all the time to remember to talk to God, to share with God, to invite God into my thoughts. When I feel a little moody, God, can you be with me? I'm taking it back. I'm getting uptight. I can feel myself going the wrong way. But see, I had to develop an awareness of when I was going the wrong way so that I can make a choice to go the right way. And Walter Russell refers to it as that every time he would fatigue or feel tired from work, he knew that his ego had taken over, and he would open up his studio door and he'd say, Walter, you leave. God, come on back in. Right? And that's what we do metaphorically, what I do all the time. Ken, get out of here. God, you take over and you guide this. You guide my next steps. You guide my next thoughts. What would you have me focus on, God? This thing just happened and it's a problem. Can you help me to find the solution? Because I've also learned in life, the answer is never in problems. The answer is always in the solution. Start becoming a solution person, and that's all you have left. You never have to consider the problem, but one time, and then the other 99% of the time, the energy is dedicated towards a solution. There's a problem. That's all I need to consider. Now, what's the solution? And go right into it. How can I solve this? What's the resolution? Where does the solution lie? And if I don't know the answer right away, I can trust that my Heavenly Father will unfold it in me as I'm ready to hear it. Lead me to the right people. Open up the right doors to help me always find the solution. So, my past will be my future if I keep reliving it. I had to stop reliving my past. I had to stop using my past as an identity for who I am today. I had to stop using my past as a badge to tell you how tough or rough I was. I had to stop referring to that past because when I referred to that past, then I couldn't change. I was mandated by that character in that past. So I want to be a new man every moment. I never want to be the man of yesterdays. I want to be the man of now. It's always about now. I can be with God right now, right here on camera with you folks right now. But I can't be with God 5 minutes from now, and I can't be with God 5 minutes ago if I wasn't there. I'm always with God is my goal. That's my supreme goal. And that's why I invite God into every moment. Whether I turn right or left in life, it doesn't matter. I always go with God. So I don't make wrong decisions anymore. I can make decisions now with the freedom of knowing I'm doing it with God. And with God means I'm doing it from love. So awakening your inner genius and why it's so important is because out of all these years of lecturing and doing what I've done, I know that God's been training me for many years to carry a message integrated with what I've learned from the cosmogony of the Russells and what I've learned from recovery and those 12 steps, which are non-denominational. But they do lead us to a path of self-searching. They do help me to probe the senses so that I can articulate the damage that's gone on. So when Kimberly and I fell in love, we wanted to carry this mission. It's this message that brought us together, and it's this message that we share so lovingly together. And it is, man, I would have never mandated, oh, she's got to believe my beliefs or be into the stuff I'm into. But man, it makes so much sense that if to find true love, you're going to find someone just like you. And that beautiful woman right there is me in a female form. No question about it. And when you can say that, you found your true partner is what I believe. And my love is just flourished and blossomed since we've crossed paths, and it took a long time to get her. That's why I say, don't tell yourself, oh, I'm getting too old. It's too late, because it was in my 59th year that I fell in love with my true mate. And I worked my butt off to get here. So I knew what love was, and I know I'm in love because I've learned what love is, because I live love. You learn it when you live it, and when you live it, you have it. And when you live love, you don't want to live anything else, because it is the magic key that opens all doors to life. So when we started Awakening Our Genius, it's the same thing. And the reason I started lecturing a long time ago, I wanted to carry a message that helped me transform from an old character to a new character, from a character that lived through the body and the senses to a character that lived through the mind and the spirit and through the heart. See, because I don't live in my left arm or my right arm. I live in my heart. I live inside here. This is my life. My life is how I feel inside about the world that I live in and the people that I'm around. And so I found out for me, if I keep living from the outside in, I'm never going to be happy. That they were right when they say happiness comes from the inside out. And so you have to live from the inside out. And that's what I've learned. And the way that I live from the inside out is I have this beautiful light inside of me. And I call it the God light. And I commune with it right now in this moment. As I'm talking to you, I can still be connecting to God. Think of how many voices you have in your head. You know, I always wonder, which one am I talking to when I say, why did you just do that? I'm wondering, who's the one saying, why'd you just did that? Right? So we have lots of voices in our head, but there's really only two voices. One is the God voice, and the other one is the sense voice. And the sense voice is living from the outside in, and the God voice is living from the inside out. And happiness comes from the inside out. The kingdom of heaven is within, where that light is. So how do I get there? By asking God, can you show me how to be loving? Can you show me how to have a relationship with you? God, I don't even know how to do that. I had to start from scratch. But that's what this Awakening Your Inner Genius is about. It's about introducing you to a living God, a God that you're aware of all the time, that you're never disconnected from, and that you know you have an inherent right to live a life triumphant, to be the best you've ever been. And I believe that every human being that I've learned with the people that I've worked with, and I've worked with many souls, that everybody just wants to know that they're operating at their best. And I got to tell you, 99% of my life, I know I'm operating at my best. I'm giving it my best because I don't have anything less than that to give anymore. I always give it my best because I always give love now. I don't do anything half-baked anymore. I try and do things to their fullest. And that's why I have a full, rich life. And that's why, we're doing these little breaks from Awakening Your Inner Genius to give you some vignettes about our lives, our paths. We all have different paths. The similarities are going to be in the transformation is always the same. It's going from body sensing to spirit illumining, to mind awakening. And mind awakening is the greatest gift that anybody could ever tap into, because when you have mind awakening, you are no longer limited. You can create anything you want in this world. And most importantly to me is to create love, is to have loving relationships, be loving, and to know that I walk around the world and I have good thoughts. I have loving thoughts about people. I walk in a grocery store and I smile at people. I don't have to smile at them with my mouth. I smile on the inside. I wish them well-being from the inside. I have good thoughts. If I see a car accident, sometimes I drive by, God, let there be no injuries, be as minimal as possible. Nobody be hurt. I'm just putting some blessings over that. I do those things and it blesses my life. I think I'm blessing other people, but really I'm blessing my life. Every time I share love, give love, whether it's in thought, whether it's in word, or whether it's in deed, it is absolutely carrying the message that I'm designed to carry, that we're all designed to carry, the message of love and the message of light. Light is what we use to manifest our ideas. Love is the motivator to help us, to inspire us to create. Come from love and there's nothing you can't create, and live in inspiration, and the joy and ecstasy of life will just keep unfolding for you. There is no limit to what God can handle. As long as I keep giving God the credit, that means there is no more limits. The minute I start taking credit for good things and what's happening, it's almost like a shut-off switch. But as long as I keep giving the credit to God, you thank me, I thank God. You tell me that I did something good, I thank God for giving me the grace and insight of how to be and how to live that moment. I don't take credit anymore, because that little ego of sense self will come back. Its recuperative powers are amazing. It just takes one thought and I become that old character where my past is my future and I can't get out of it. It also just takes one thought to be back in God's world and live in the light and being in a good thing. So remember that. If you're ever feeling off track, one thought can totally tear you down and make you feel like a muck and feel bad and what we call depolarize you. And one thought can polarize you, make you feel good, make you feel wonderful about the world you live in. If you don't feel good, you're only one thought away from feeling better about the world you live in. And if you desire for that thought to come to fruition, I'll guarantee you that it'll awaken in you just like it has awakened in me. So that's it. That's my story. I've got more to do that I'll be doing on the Man Who Tapped and how it's inspired me and changed my life. I'll be talking about some of the application that I learned from it. And I'll be coming on over the next couple months in the summer. We're going to alternate speaking. We're going to have rotation on the panel of people talking. And so I will see you soon. I'll look forward to it. I hope you enjoyed my little story, and I look forward to hearing more about you as I share more about myself with you. God bless.